Stories come and stories go. Stories ebb and stories flow. Stories fade and stories stay. Some are remembered to this day. Hello and welcome to the Friday Fantasy Show from the Bottled Imp, exploring the realms of fantasy. My name is Ken Boyter and today we're going to be taking a look at Jim Henson's The Storyteller, the novelization. Oh yes. Now this is based on, I'll just quickly swap that for this, based on the Storyteller TV series. Again, created by Jim Henson. And Jim Henson, obviously, you probably know him from the Muppets, but he also did fantasy films The Dark Crystal and also Labyrinth. Now, this collection is a collection, oh, that's the back of it. That's the front of it. This is a collection of short stories that were created into the script form for the TV show, and they were written by Anthony Mingella of The English Patient fame and also the talented Mr. Ripley. He wrote those screenplays. And he did this way before he did those, but you can kind of see the early genius that he is. Now these are, as I say, these are adapted from the screenplay, but originally these are old ancient folk tales and fairy stories from across Europe. So I was curious. I really loved the TV show when I was a kid. It had a big influence on me, on my love of fantasy and folk tales and fairy stories, and my love of writing fantasy as well, and my love of trying to write some folk stories as well. And I just wondered, when I did some research, because we did a review of the TV series a couple of years ago, when I was looking into that, I discovered that they had this adaptation. Now this is a 2014 edition, this is a hardback, and it has some lovely illustrations, and they are by Hannah Christenson and Eva I don't know if I'm pronouncing this, sorry, Eskelinen, sorry about that. And they have put, also in the back, there is a archive. It tells you a little bit about behind the scenes of the TV show of The Storyteller. And I was curious, just how good are the stories when they're not in script form? Can Anthony Mingella maintain the magic of the TV series? Let's find out. The Storyteller, the novelization, written by Anthony Minghella. How do you say it? Mingella. What's the setup? Well, yes, as I say, they are short stories. There is 9 of them, and they are all based on classic fairy tales from various different countries across Europe and other countries as well. So that's just other countries. I don't know why I put Europe in there as well. Anyway, they are from Germany, Ireland, Russia, Scandinavia, Switzerland, Italy, Scotland, Slovakia, and Greece. And so you get a wide variety here. So what they've done is they've done plenty of research. Now what happened was Jim Henson, way back in the early start of his career, he loved the classic fairy tales and he wanted to kind of bring that to the screen. So he decided to go on a little trip into Europe and he wanted to go and find some source material. And this was way back, I think, in 1958. Anyway, he really was inspired, and that's when he wanted to do a kind of film version, or I don't know if it was puppetry, but I think he had puppetry in mind. He wanted to do a Hansel and Gretel film, and he started kind of, mulling that idea around, but his Muppets, yes, he is the Jim Henson of the Muppets, his Muppets project started to take off as well, so that then became more and more successful. So he then dropped the Hansel and Gretel idea, abandoned his plans for that. But he never lost the love of his fairy tales and the folklore stories that he found out. So what he did, he snuck them into the Muppets as well, because he then had Sesame Street with the Muppets as well, and he did kind of plays on classic fairy tales like Cinderella, the Frog Prince, and also the musicians of Bremen. They appeared in the Muppets and Sesame Street, I believe. And so he then got a taste for it, and because he was becoming more and more successful with the Muppets and Sesame Street, he then did a couple of films in the mid-80s, The Dark Crystal, which we've done a review of, and also Labyrinth, which we've done a review of as well. So after the success of that, he was then looking for another project because he'd set up his creature shop. It was a company that specialised in this type of puppetry and special effects. And it was kind of pre-CGI, so a lot of it was in camera. A lot of it was puppetry with the hand or big sticks or people in costumes and latex and that kind of special effects. Now it was his daughter Lisa Henson, who suggested that the television idea of doing folklore, authentic tales, because she was studying it at Harvard University at the time. And Jim had said that he loved the traditional fairy tales, and he also said that I think they have a lot to say, and the stories have a lot of substance. They work for the present day, and substance they do have. Classic fairy tales seem to have layers upon layers, and I think that is what drew Jim Henson, obviously amongst other things, into these stories, and the fact that they stay with you and they are still relevant. And even this was made back in the series was made in 87 or released in 87. They're still relevant now, and that's 1890. That's 20 years later. All the stories are still relevant today, and what they did is that the production team read hundreds and hundreds of classic fairy tales from around the world, and they whittled it down to 9. And they are The Three Ravens, Hans My Hedgehog, The Soldier and Death, The Luck Child, The True Bride, Fear Not, The Heartless Giant, Sap's Sorrow, and A Short Story. And I'm not going to go through every single one of these short stories, but I'm going to pull out a few themes and a few of the stories that I really, really did enjoy. And I did enjoy all of them. There's no secret in that. If you have watched my review on the Storyteller TV show, I love it. I adore it. It has everything that you want from classic stories, classic folk tales. So the one I do like a few of these, and some of them are my favourites, and I will say that Hans My Hedgehog is in that category, and that is an early German folk tale, and it's all about a farmer's wife who desperately wants a baby, but unfortunately they can't have children. And she just, wishes this every single day, every minute of the day, all her being, her fibres, everything she wishes for a baby. And she says, even if it's ugly. Well, you got to be careful what you wish for, because she does become pregnant and she gives birth to half hedgehog, half man baby. So it's a kind of a mixture, a hybrid, and doesn't faze the mother. She loves it regardless of what it looks like. But the father can't handle it. He can't handle the fact that his son is a freak in his eyes, and that people ridicule his son and therefore ridicule the family. And I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but that's the setup. So the themes really covered all the lessons that you should learn, because I feel that's what fairy tales tell you. They kind of impart some wisdom, and if it's a good fairy tale and a good folklore story, then it will actually be ones that don't ram that message down your throat, but you kind of, they just kind of subtly get into your brain after you've read it. And so you've got to be careful what you wish for, because you've got to be really precise what you wish for something, and have you really thought that through when you're going to wish for something. And it also touched on the theme of love and loyalty can actually transform other emotions, and a lot of the fairy tales, they have like something that's really literal is actually a metaphor for something else. So in this case, again, I don't want to do any spoilers, but the whole hedgehog and being ugly, and the fact that he's got these quills that are prickly, is actually a metaphor for something else. So it does touch on the fact that love, just pure love, no matter what it is you're loving or how you're loving it, as long as it's pure love, then that can transform anything, that can overcome anything. And another story that I really enjoyed was The Soldier and Death, and I found it a really clever story. It had lots of layers to it. They all have lots of layers. And this is an early Russian folk tale that was retold in English by Arthur Ranson, and also inspired by the story Godfather Death. And it's about a soldier, and through kindness manages to cheat death, but with unforeseen consequences. And again, I don't want to give anything away, because when you read these, you just want the stories to kind of flow over you and enjoy all the surprises and the twists and turns. But the themes here are kindness, basically, acts of kindness, and that can gain rewards, but you shouldn't expect that, because the reward, the ultimate reward of doing an act of kindness is actually doing the act of kindness. Then you have the consequences. So all acts, regardless of whether they're kind or nasty or funny or humorous or whatever that type of act is, will have a consequence regardless of what it is. And really, you shouldn't be too surprised, if you're behaving nastily towards somebody, that they're going to behave nastily back to you. The consequences aren't necessarily going to be one that you wanted. So you really do have to think about your actions and how you behave towards other people. And also there's the natural order of things, and I really like this. This is kind of like one of those stories that has sort of a micro story running along, just based on the character and what they're up to, but also a bigger picture, that good versus evil type macro picture. And this is all about the natural order of things. Don't go monkeying around with the natural order of life. And that's one of the beauties of this story, is that it is multi-layered. And the fact that there's a natural order to life that humankind, should not try and change, again, just adds that extra sort of kicker to this story. And another one that I really enjoyed was a short story, and that is an early Celtic folk tale, and it's an adaptation of the stone soup fable. And this one is, I'd actually went to Edinburgh Fringe as a punter to go up there, and I did see a storyteller, and it was a Scottish guy, and he was just telling stories, and one of which was the stone soup fable. And I didn't realise that it was a bit of a classic, I didn't realise it was an actual folk story, because I just knew it from the storyteller. And so it was really clever. I now understood how Anthony Mingella mingled that story into this story, because the premise of the storyteller is you have the character played by John Hurt in the TV series, who is a storyteller, and he is essentially just telling you a story, but then they cut to live action or animation and special effects. And every now and again you'll get back to John Hurt telling the story. So it is very much a gather around by the fireplace. And what I didn't realise, so in the TV series, they actually put the storyteller as this story. So this story is actually about him. And I really like that, because, John Hurt's an actor anyway, but the storyteller character, the narrator, you do engage with. He is another character within all of these stories. And so it does involve the storyteller. And he's in a bit of hot bother. He gets, again, I don't want to give too much away, I don't want to spoil it. But he has to, basically, he gets into a situation where he has to tell a story every single day, a different story, a new story, to a king for a year and 1 day. And it needs to be a different story every day. And for that, he will get a gold crown. So obviously, he's going to get pretty rich at the end of it. But, he's thinking initially, well, this is fine. I'm going to get a warm bed to sleep in. I'm going to get food in my belly. I won't have to go and, travel from town to town telling my stories. I can just stay here, tell a story. But obviously, he's, what's that, 366 stories? Depends if it's a leap year, I guess. To come up with, or he might have a back catalogue, he might know a lot, but does he know that many? And that, again, I don't want to spoil it, but one of the themes is that, there's actually hope. So just when you think you're at rock bottom and you can't go any further, yes, there is a glimmer of hope. And also, the using your own wits, you might have resources, if you dig deep, that you didn't think you had there. So it's learning to rely on yourself and to be independent and use your cunning and use your wits. And you might be surprised. So again, I like that fact that you don't rely on other people, you can be independent. And you have got all the resources you need within inside you, but you just don't know it. And it maybe takes a difficult situation or somebody else to point that out to you. And sometimes if someone else, because they're seeing you with their own eyes, with different sets of eyes to you, you might be a bit depressed about yourself, or you don't think you're very good at anything, but other people see you differently. And sometimes you just need that pointing out to you for you then to flourish and and actually succeed. So I really love that theme as well. And also, adaptation to life. How do you cope in different situations? How do you adapt? Life isn't static. Life changes all the time. People are unpredictable. People can throw you curveballs. They can be, very kind one moment and very nasty the next. So how do you adapt? How do you adapt to situations? And again, that kind of ties in with using your own wits and your own cunning. So as I say, I'm not going to go through every single one. There's loads of different themes. There's normally kind of themes and layers to each story. And of course, there's words of wisdoms with these classic fairy tales. And I love that. I kind of feel like you're being entertained, you're being, but also you're learning something. And I really do feel that they're relevant for every single generation. And I think that's why we keep retelling them, the classics, Cinderella, all the other classics, Rumpelstiltskin, all of them, they keep getting told over and over again, and they keep getting updated so that they're still accessible for every single generation. And they're everything that you want from a storyteller. There's magic, there's warmth, there's humour, there's peril, there's actual danger, and one or two touch on quite dark subjects as well, and they deal with them, but in a way that is, just very mature, even though they're primarily, I guess you could say, these fairy tales are for children, but they're dealt in a very mature and loving way, and I think that's key as well. It's a very safe environment if you're a child and you're reading this, or you're getting them read to you. There's a sense of wonder, and there's a sense of that wisdom that comes through. And of course, ultimately, they're great characters and great stories with twists, turns. You don't necessarily, know what's going to come next, and anything can happen. I absolutely adore that. And Anthony Minghella, he wrote an introduction, and when he wrote them, he used the original folk stories, as I say, and then he wrote them in his own voice. And what a voice that is. He has such a way with words, such a style with words, such beautiful expressions and phrases that come across the page. Just what you want, it just adds that extra layer of magic into the folk tales. And in the introduction, I'm just going to read a little bit, which I really was inspired by. He said, and this is Anthony Mingella talking, "I have taken liberties, invented what I've forgotten, and changed what I've remembered." And I love that. And he says also in the introduction that there's a Tuscan proverb which is, "The tale is not beautiful if nothing is added to it." And I love the fact that, if you are telling, say, Cinderella to your children, and you kind of know that story, you might embellish on it, you might add something different. And I do remember doing exactly the same when I worked over in Camp America. On camps in America. I watched the Boys and Girls Camp in just outside Boston, and I found that if I made up a story to the kids rather than read it from a book, they actually believed it more because I was a bit more passionate, a bit more animated with it, and I could really embellish it. And then I remember each year I'd go back, I did them 4 summers, and I would tell them again, but I would forget bits and I would add things to it and embellish it. And the kids loved it. And some of the kids who came back actually remembered some of the details that I'd forgotten. So you just don't know. These sorts of stories really are memorable. I love that. And these stories did stay with me. So when I was reading them now, as opposed to watching them on television, I thought they did a fantastic job Anthony Mingella did a fantastic job of converting them into proper stories. So if you've never seen the TV show, doesn't really matter. You will enjoy these stories just by reading them. And I would say if you have got children, what a delight. You could read them. You could read these to your children and they will fall in love with them. Plus, there are some really nice illustrations that run through the book as well in this edition. So that's always cool. I love the fact that, folk tales, you should have a few illustrations as well. And I just love the fact that also you are learning lessons throughout these stories, and it's done in, as I said before, it's done in a really subtle way. It's just like they're there. You kind of feel like that they just, that it just feels right. What they're teaching you just feels right. And I just remember learning kind of morals and about the way the world works through folk tales and fairies. That might explain a lot about my outview in life, but I just feel like, it's actually a lot of wisdom in these stories. And they stay with you. And if you can write something, if you can tell your children stories that actually is memorable and can stay with them for a lifetime, wow, what a set of stories you have. There we go, that's The Storyteller. Jim Henson's The Storyteller, the novelization. Thank you so much for watching. Oh, what a book. If you love stories of any kind, forget fantasy. These are so beautifully written, you will be immersed in them. And you'll just want to keep turning the page to find out what happens next, and you'll just want to keep reading the short stories one after the other. As I say, thank you so much for watching. We have done the TV show review of this, and again, check that out. If you've not ever seen or heard about The Storyteller, you are in for a treat. And remember, we do have a brand new show that comes out every Monday now, and it's called, The Bottled Imp Show. I know, we could have thought of a more imaginative title, but we thought that it just does what it says. So that's going to be going out every Monday, so check that out as well. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to keep it unreal, especially if you're a storyteller.